welcome to another video. I knit the Saven Sweater by Meghan Babin, and this is a visual diary of my experience. So a little bit about this pattern. This is an oversized cabled sweater that uses worsted weight yarn. The recommended yarn is the Hudson & West Forge yarn, which is a 70% merino, 30% Corriedale 3-ply yarn. But as I'll get into later in the video, I decided to go with a different yarn. This sweater is knit bottom up, entirely flat and seamed. The pattern does include 2 gauges, one for reverse stockinette and one for the main cable chart. I did end up knitting both, but I found that it was hard to get an accurate gauge with the cabled swatch. I mainly just did it to practice reading the chart and knitting the cables. I did end up meeting gauge on the stockinette swatch with the recommended needle sizes, so at that point I was excited to cast on. As I mentioned before, this pattern is knit flat, bottom up, which means for each piece I am casting on in 1x1 rib. The pattern recommends a tubular cast on, but seeing as that is not my ministry, I tried an alternative that offered a similar look. It's called the alternating cast on, and I'll include a link to the tutorial I followed down in the description box. I found it much easier to get the hang of, and I love the look and stretch. Tubular who? We don't know her. My first step was to knit both sleeves. And I know that several people chose to knit 2 at a time, but I figured I would keep it simple and portable by only knitting 1 sleeve at a time. As I was doing it, I found that as I worked through the sleeves and completed more chart repeats, I got significantly faster with the cabling. So about halfway through sleeve number 1, I realized I could do all the cabling without a cable needle. So I know in some of these clips that I'm holding a cable needle as I'm cabling, but by the time I finished that first sleeve, I was just flying through it. It's crazy how quick I got at the cables. So the first sleeve took me 10 days, but the second sleeve only took me 4 days. Okay, so it's been about a week. It has been about 1 week since I started my Saven sweater. And this is the progress that I have so far. So I wanted to check in and show you guys the progress that I've had so far. At this point, I am just a few rows shy of finishing all of the increases for the first sleeve. And so that's what we have here. The pattern says to continue after finishing all the decreases, continue straight until you reach about 18.5 inches. But the pattern is written, the dimensions of the finished pattern are written for a male's body. So all of the schematics and everything are originally written to fit men's standard measurements. So in the pattern, there is an optional modifications that you can make to both the sleeves and the body to achieve more of a feminine fit. And I do plan to incorporate those modifications for my sweater. So the first one is that for the size that I'm doing, which is the 4th size, it instructs to continue knitting straight after the increases until you reach 18.5 inches. Whereas to modify it to be a more feminine fit, the designer suggests only knitting to about 16.5 or so inches. She said to reduce the length by 1 to 2 inches. So at this point, again, I'm 4 rows shy of my last increase row. So in 4 rows, I will have completed all of the increases, and I from that point will have to knit straight, so no more increasing. So at this point, I'm at about just over 16 inches. Okay, I'm just about here. And so I figure once I do those 4 more rows and I finish the increases for the sleeve, then I will just go knitting. I will omit knitting straight for any length because I will have already reached the sleeve length that I need to in order to move on to the next part of the pattern. And so after the increases and you knit straight, if you need to, then you are doing decreases for like the shoulder portion. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't looked too far ahead in terms of the next steps for the sleeve, but I wanted to check in and let you guys know what a week of progress on this sweater looks like. And I also wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about my cast on modification, I guess you could call it. So I'll give you a close-up of what my cast on edge looks like. And it is not a tubular cast on, which is what the pattern called for. I've attempted the tubular cast on a number of times with my Weekender sweater by Andrea Mowry, and I didn't have any success with that. And I don't know that it was to do with how it was written. I don't think that's what it was, because Andrea Mowry is very known for writing clear and to the point patterns. But I do think that it just doesn't work for me. My hands just can't. And I think it's way more complicated than it needs it to be. So I will link below the tutorial that I did use, but from what I understand, this cast on is called the alternating cast on or the Italian cast on. I'm not sure what the actual technical term for it is, but with a tubular, if you've never done it before, there's a series of setup rows that you have to do before you can get to the standard 1x1 ribbing. And there's a provisional element of it too, so you're using some waste yarn at some point. It is all a bit too complex for my preferences, so I definitely wanted to do something a lot simpler. But I did like the look of the tubular cast on, so I went to YouTube to sort of see if I had any good alternatives that achieved, for the most part, the same effect, but were not as complicated and as tedious as the tubular. And that's how I stumbled upon this tutorial, which again, I will link below, but I am really happy with how it turned out. And so as you can see, similar to the tubular cast on, the stitches sort of just roll over the edge. You don't have a noticeable line of your stitches where you cast it on as you would be for your standard long tail or traditional cast on methods. And that's what I really liked about this method. Add to that the fact that there is no setup rows. It is very simple and straightforward, and it was so easy for me to catch on. It definitely has the feel of a standard long tail cast on. So if you are comfortable with the long tail cast on and that's your go-to method, I don't think that this would be too complicated for you to get the hang of pretty easily. And I really liked that I found that alternative. For so long until finding that tutorial, I kind of assumed that if you wanted that look of the sort of rolled over stitches and no obvious cast on edge, then the tubular was pretty much my only option. And since discovering this, I am super encouraged to try it out on other projects, and it's just another skill that I'll have in my toolbox for future knits, and I'm sure I'll be using it a lot. The other thing I wanted to say about this cast on is that it is really stretchy. So one of the limitations I think of a standard long tail is that it is stretchy, but it's not super stretchy. So depending on what project you want to use it in, it might not suit your needs in terms of stretchiness. But with this cast on, I'll just do a demonstration of how stretchy it is. So it is just as stretchy as the ribbing itself. One of the issues that I have encountered with casting on in 1x1 rib is that the rib itself will be a lot stretchier than the cast on method that I use. And if I sub that out for, say, a German twisted cast on, I definitely get the stretch that I need. But for a project like this, where I wanted that seamless edge, the German twisted cast on creates a noticeable cast on edge. And so with this method, I get all of the stretch of the German twisted with the invisible sort of edge that the tubular creates. And I think it's a no-brainer, and this, I would highly recommend attempting this cast on. And yeah, what else can I say about it? The pattern repeats have been really easy to get the hang of. I didn't find myself messing up too bad. I didn't find myself in a position where I had to drop down and fix anything. I've been following the chart pretty effortlessly. I mean, at this point, it's more so muscle memory. I just glance at the row and know what I'm supposed to do for the whole row, which is really nice because going into this project, I was super intimidated by how complicated that this might be. And I'm finding that I'm really getting the hang of it and getting into the rhythm. And I think sleeve number 2 by comparison will be a breeze. One thing that I did do unintentionally is I missed a few increases on the edges. 2 times at this point throughout this sleeve, I missed an increase, and I just ended up doing it on the following right side row. And I modified my notes so that when I go back to do the second sleeve that I will intentionally make the same mistake, so at least that they are symmetrical. What else can I say? That's really all I have to say at this point in terms of a project update. I did also want to show you guys the app that I've been using to count my rows. So before I even started the sleeve, I input a bunch of notes into this app. So the app is called Row Counter, and I've been using this for a while. As you can see, I have several projects on here, but you can essentially start a row count project for each project that you do. And for this one in particular, I've created one for this sweater. And so for the first one here, I have basically all of the rows. So I just ticked off a row for the ribbing every time I completed a row for the ribbing. And then I updated it in here to say that I have to do 21 rows in total. And so when I come back to do the second sleeve, I'll just follow all of my notes in the app for sleeve number 2. The other cool thing about this app is that you can add secondary counters. And so this is helpful for a pattern like this that has cables and charts and cable repeats, because what I've done here is essentially, as I'm ticking off each of the rows, this secondary counter below, you can see is changing with the rows as I tick them off. And so overall, for the main part of the sleeve after the ribbing, I'm completing row 101, but I am in that 101st row doing the 5th row of the cable repeat. And so that makes it really mindless to always know where I am in the pattern. If at any point I put the project down and have to pick it back up, I'll just refer to the app and I know exactly where I am in the app or in the project. And you can also, there's a feature here where you can link it. And so this being lit up blue means that it is linked to my main counter. So every time I change a row, obviously the secondary row count changes as well. But you can unlink it, and so that when you change your main counter, the secondary counter doesn't change. And I suspect that this could be useful if you are doing, I don't know, this could be useful if you need to do a certain number of increases, for example. And so you're ticking off your rows and then you're checking off your increases. But what I will also say is that this has the feature where you can add notes to every section or to particular rows in a section. So in this case, I just went through and I put all of my increases that I needed to do for the entire sleeve on every corresponding row that I need to do the increase on. And so again, makes it super easy to keep track of. I'm not making any physical tick marks on a piece of paper or anything like that. And I figured this would really come in handy for a project that's a little more complex than I'm used to. So that's just one less thing that I have to manually keep track of. And I can instead just focus on row by row what I'm supposed to be doing and let the app sort of dictate that for me. And I think it's helped a lot in terms of making this project a little more manageable to do. I'm curious, do you prefer winding your yarn as you go or all at once in the beginning? I personally find that winding yarn as I go is a way for me to physically note a project milestone and take a step away from the actual knitting to reflect on my progress. Eventually, towards the end of November, I had to take about a month away from working on this project to focus on some last-minute gift making. So as you just saw, I just picked the project back up after about over a month of not working on it, and I have cranked out the first full repeat on the back, and yeah, it's moving along quite nicely. So that was a quick little check-in for my progress. At this point, it is Christmas Eve, December 24th. We're about to travel to my husband's family, and I'm hoping to get another full repeat today. We'll see how it goes. But I want to have the complete project finished by January 31st. Unfortunately, I didn't capture a lot of footage of me knitting the front and back panels. I was really in the zone trying to get the project done ASAP. I was definitely getting impatient. And when I finished the back panel, I actually waited and realized I didn't have enough yarn to finish the front, so I ended up purchasing another skein. And it wasn't until much later that I realized I knit the body to the schematic measurements instead of modifying for the more feminine fit, like I mentioned earlier in this video. I think if I had remembered to crop the body a little bit more, I wouldn't have run out of yarn. Okay, so forgive the really bad lighting, but I think what we're showing here will be visible enough. So I figured I'd come on and check in regarding my progress on this project. I don't think I've been collecting much in the way of footage. So I wanted to give an update to share where I am with the project and sort of some of the things, some of my thoughts about it at this point. So as you can see here, I have almost completed the front panel of the sweater. I've done the right of the neck shaping, and after I record this clip, I'm gonna go and finish the left side of the neck. And so this is where I am with the front panel. The pattern did instruct to do both sides of the neck at the same time. And so working one side and attaching a separate piece of yarn to work the other side simultaneously. But at this point, this is the yarn I have left, and that would have required me to either work simultaneously from both the outside and inside of this cake, or split this remaining yarn in half and just have two separate balls of the yarn going on either side. And I considered it, and it honestly wouldn't have been too much of an inconvenience to do that, but I just didn't want to do the extra step. I figured I would just work them separately. And the way the pattern is written is that every row includes the instructions for either side. So it was kind of tricky at first, sort of reading the rows and making sure that I'm only following the instructions for the side that I'm working. But in the end, I think it turned out successfully. I will say that as I was going through the decreases, at a certain point, I was to have 4 stitches after all of my decreases were done. However, I had still one more raglan shaping decrease. So that's this this outer edge of the panel. I still had one of those left according to my notes, but I was already at the 4 stitches. So I don't know if that's a mistake I made somewhere in the stitch count or in my decrease rows, but that's something that I'll have to be mindful of for the second side. And if it was a mistake and I happen to not repeat that mistake on this side, I'm a little concerned that it may be not identical, but I think whatever inconsistencies there are will be probably not very noticeable when the garment is all finished. So that's the front panel. You'll notice that I'm using a different yarn for seaming. I just grabbed some worsted weight acrylic from my stash. Not only will it add some additional strength and stability, it's easier to see what I'm doing since the yarn is noticeably different in color and texture than the fabric. And I thought this would be really helpful because this is the first time I've ever mattress seamed anything. There is some weird puckering around the neck area, which I was initially concerned about, but that's why the pattern instructs an additional wet blocking after seaming. Forgive the awful lighting, but my Saven, I should have looked into that before I recorded this video. Anyway, the sweater is done. It's been done for a couple weeks now, maybe going on 3 weeks, but I'm in denial. I've been in denial. I'm not in denial anymore. Let me show you what I've been in denial about. Here it is, my finished Saven, in all its glory. It's beautiful. We love her. We appreciate her. It's incredibly soft, and it fits well, dare I say perfectly, except for one, you might say, glaring issue. And I'm not even going to bother explaining it. I'm just going to show you. The neck is a bit too tight. So while it's on, I think it fits really well. And I'm sorry, I didn't put my mic on the camera for this clip, so if the sound quality isn't great, forgive me. But I think it fits really nicely. Very close to the neck. I love a good close fitting crew neck. But there is 0% stretch where the ribbing meets the sweater. So it's very difficult for me to get it over my head. Obviously it fits, it takes some finessing, but I am afraid that over time I might risk snapping a thread somewhere in the neck, trying to get it on and off, or I'll wear it out prematurely by the amount of maneuvering that I have to do just to get it over my head. So I'm not so sure it is sustainable to leave the collar as is. But at this point, I have already woven all my ends, and I probably should have tried it on before I did that, but you live and you learn. I've already woven all my ends, and it does fit. It's a pain to get on. It's easier to get off, but at this point, I'm in a little bit of a back and forth with myself on whether or not I actually want to fix it. So I'll at some point film a proper cutaway where I'm actually wearing the sweater and the lighting is better and you can see how it fits in all its glory. But I just wanted to pop on and share my thoughts, and I guess at this point this video is so delayed. I finished the sweater so long ago, but I've yet to take FO pictures and I have yet to actually finish recording clips for this video and edit and upload, because the neckline is a serious point of contention for me at this point, and I'm really undecided on whether or not I want to attempt undoing it and either trying to bind off and find a more stretchy way to do the folded collar, or undo it completely and just pick up more stitches so that I have a more roomy fit, and so regardless of the stretch, that it will be able to comfortably fit over my head. So that's kind of what I'm going back and forth with in my mind at this point. Yeah, I've just been in denial, and I mean, like, other than the neck, I think the sweater is really more than I could have ever imagined. Super proud of myself, super happy with how it turned out, but this is just kind of like this is just that one thing that's just like, I'm so mad at myself. I'm so mad at myself. I should have tried it on before I sewed all the ends. I blocked it and everything. And I had a moment of sheer panic when I tried it on for the first time. And as you saw, it's very difficult to get over my head. But for a few terrifying moments, I was convinced that it wouldn't go over my head at all. And when I finally did get it over, it was like, on one hand, I'm really relieved it does fit. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'm gonna have to go through this every time I want to wear this sweater. Is this really sustainable? Should I consider ripping it out and fixing it? But when it's on, it's perfect. And so there's some good and there's some bad there. And right now I'm just trying to navigate my internal sort of dilemma of deciding whether I want to fix it or not. And I'm just gonna go ahead and say by tomorrow I will have decided one way or the other. I'll wrap the finishing clips of this video, get it edited and uploaded, but I just wanted to pop on and share what's kind of going through my mind at this point. Obviously, by the time you see this video, it'll be too late, but feel free to comment below and let me know what you would do if you were in this situation. Would you redo the collar even though it just barely fits over your head? Or would you live with it or try to live with it like I'm 95% sure that I'm gonna do? Okay, bye. Hi. So it's the next day and I slept on it. I gave it some thought and I had decided to keep the sweater as is. If you saw the clip from earlier, you will see that it was marginally easier to get over my head. And I have apparently convinced myself that over time it will gradually get easier to get over my head and it won't be such a hassle to put on and take off. So as of now, this is staying. The neckline is staying and I'm just gonna have to live with it. But other than that, I love everything about the sweater. It's a little bit too long. So I'll set you back and step back. Here's my waist and the sweater comes down to my upper thigh. It pretty much fully covers my butt. So I think this will be a nice sweater to actually wear with like leggings because it covers all of that. But ideally, I think I would have preferred a more cropped fit, but that's okay. I don't dislike it enough to take the sweater apart and fix it. Ultimately, I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. I think though, if I had knitted a little more cropped, I wouldn't have found myself losing a battle of yarn chicken. So at a certain point in this project, and at this point I can't remember what I had documented and what I haven't, so I apologize if this is repetitive for you. But at some point during the course of this project, I actually ran out of yarn completely. I started with 9 balls of yarn and I had to buy a 10th ball to be able to finish it up. I'd probably gotten to about this point in the front panel. So I had to finish the front panel and do the collar and seam the sweater together. So that was unfortunate that I had to buy another yarn or another ball of yarn, but the 9 balls, the first 9 balls were actually purchased from Pearl Soho with a gift card. Which I think is an important little detail to share because this yarn is not cheap. I would not recommend it if it's like your first cabled sweater or maybe something experimental because 10 balls at I think $22 a ball is $220, not including shipping, not including taxes or any other costs that you might add to this. So it's definitely not a cheap project, but the yarn is so soft. So soft. This is easily the softest sweater that I own. I love it. But the drawback of it being so soft is that I definitely anticipate experiencing a lot of pilling. And I think this sweater will show wear and tear a lot easier than maybe other fibers would. So that's something to keep in mind. At this point, I have worn the sweater once, like out and about during like a regular day of activities. And you can probably see that it starts to develop a little bit of pilling. I'm not sure how well that's transferring on camera, but I can definitely see it when I look at it. And that was kind of one of my concerns that I had in my mind when I first started this project. I'm like, is a all over cable sweater that I'm gonna put all this time and effort into that might just pill like crazy immediately after finishing it, is that gonna be worth it? Like, is that a good choice? And I decided to go for it because I bought the yarn to make a cable sweater and I was determined to make a cable sweater. But if I had to do it all over again, I would find a more sturdy fiber for such a textured, intricate pattern. But that's okay, I'm not surprised. So at least I knew what I was getting myself into. And I think that when I give it its first good shave and over time, hopefully it'll settle and it won't pill as dramatically as it is in the beginning. What else do I want to say about this sweater? But to sum it all up, I am so pleased with how this project turned out. I learned a lot. This was my first knit sweater that I knit flat and seamed together. It was my first time doing the mattress seam. It was my first full-on cable sweater. This is my first sweater with cables at all, especially such intricate cables. Like this middle panel is like beyond anything that I've ever done before. Yeah, and it was super fun. I would recommend this to anyone who's curious about cables and cabled sweaters. I hesitate to say that this is a beginner-friendly pattern. I seem to have gotten the hang of it pretty quickly. And I shared a little bit about the app that I use to help me keep track of everything. And I think that was that played a huge hand in how successful this project went overall. So I would say that tool was invaluable for me to be able to execute this project. It was my first time trying this cast-on method as an alternative to tubular. But other than that, everything else I had done before in some capacity. Even as far as the cables, I'd done cables in a pillowcase pattern. I've done a few cable headbands. And so I think the general principles, like the very, very basic principles of cables and how they are built, I think was foundational knowledge that I had going into it. I also learned how to cable without a cable needle in this project. That was way easier than I thought it would be. And in doing that, I think I sped up my knitting time, like my knitting efficiency with cables tremendously. I didn't have to use a cable needle throughout this entire project, which a lot of people, when I said that on Instagram, messaged me like, wow, that's super impressive. But I'm just like, I don't see how people endure knitting something of this size and using a cable needle at every single cable. There are several cables in every other row. Every right side row is several cables that you're doing. So I cannot imagine enduring this entire project without a cable needle. I might have like quit halfway through. And I will say that throughout the course of knitting up this project, there were definitely times where I was feeling a little burnt out, particularly when I finished sleeve 1 and was ready to do sleeve 2. Because you're just doing the same thing twice. It's kind of like second sock syndrome, but with sleeves. And I was ready to get onto the body. And then after the sleeves, you know, I had knit the back panel first, and that was a success. I was super happy about that. And then I went to cast on the front panel, and I was just like, you're basically doing the same thing again. And I'm just like, oh, this is excruciating. So I definitely got a little burnt out at times because I felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. But ultimately throughout the whole project, the cables and like the constant, you're doing something different on every single row, really helped keep me engaged with the project and kept me wanting to continue. And it's really easy to track your progress and see how far you come, because again, the cables also serve as sort of like a project, like an inherent project sort of milestone tracker. Like you could set goals. I want to do this many cable repeats today and this many cable repeats by the end of the week. I think it helps a lot in terms of keeping my attention, keeping me engaged with the project in general. So yeah, that was really nice. Yeah, that's the sweater. I can't believe it's done. I can't believe I'm finally sitting down to record this video. I mean, that's the real miracle here. And I am really excited to do more cable projects in the future. I have my eye on a few. The top two that come to mind are the Saven Sweater by Jared Flood and the Pitch Coat by Emily Green. Those are both through Brooklyn Tweed. Anyway, you didn't ask for that. Just know that there are future videos about cable sweaters coming to this channel. So if you liked this video and you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe and like the video, share it, comment, let me know what you think. And yeah, I'll close it out here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.